In the first video, we walked through my childhood and looked at titles that got me hooked on video games for life. Unfortunately, one of those games was Final Fantasy IV, which pigeonholed me as a pretty hardcore JRPG fan for way longer than was healthy. As a result, I played a lot of really bad PlayStation RPGs in the late 90s to the exclusion of some classic titles. When formulating my Game of Every Year list, I wasn't that shocked to discover that the games that really stuck with me weren't the RPGs. This first one is, though. I became acquainted with it during my freshman year at Largo High. '95 was a great year for RPGs. We got Chrono Trigger, Lufia 2, and Secret of Evermore, classics in their own right. But for a gamer whose mantra was still story is everything, the prize definitely goes to Suikoden. That's maybe cheating a little bit. This game means a lot to me, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Part of why I love it is the continuous world built by its sequels, a vast and compelling mythology focused on regional military conflicts. But all mighty oaks begin as tiny seeds, and that seed was sown in the Scarlet Moon Empire. Suikoden's gameplay isn't great. There are dozens of characters to enlist and lots of combat options to tweak, but for the most part you can get by with auto battle and medicine spam. Dungeons are just strings of hallways and rooms that stretch on and on, the script is riddled with typos, and the art style can be inconsistent. The game is clearly Konami's first stumbling steps out into the wacky world of RPGs. I find these things endearing now, but I can see why modern players would raise an eyebrow. But that setting, though! The Scarlet Moon Empire is portrayed as a real, breathing world, and your actions in the plot have immediate, lasting effects on it. Clearing a dungeon in a Final Fantasy game, you'd be lucky if the NPCs back in town had new dialogue for you. In Suikoden, though, entire provinces of the Empire become liberated as you work your way from border to border. Your army visibly grows in strength, offering access to better resources. It's gratifying just to walk around your castle for an hour or so, chatting up the new recruits and seeing what's changed. These little intangible experiences set the series apart for me, and I was a loyal fan well after I grew out of my story is everything phase.
I like the way you work it, no diggity. I got to bag it up. I like the way you work it, no diggity.
My poor, darling mother jumped through 50 burning hoops to make sure I had a Nintendo 64 under the tree Christmas of '96. This was an exciting time for me because I'd never possessed a game console that close to its release before. Those things are expensive, and my family wasn't what you'd call affluent. I have no idea how my mom scrimped together that many pennies, but it was evidently all the pennies she had. I didn't get any actual games with my new system. But if I did all my chores and wasn't failing any classes, I could usually get a couple bucks to rent something. So I rented Mario 64. Every weekend until the following summer when I got a job and bought my own copy. All in all, I probably paid about $200 for the privilege of playing Mario 64, and it's worth every nickel. Every nice thing I already said about Super Mario Bros. Applies equally to Mario 64, just with a Z-axis. Nintendo managed to make a 3D platformer that gets everything right in a time nobody knew how to get them right. The controls are tight, the camera is intuitive, the controller was a little uncomfortable, but you can hardly blame the game for that. There were holes in the Mario formula. No familiar power-ups, for example, no linear level progression. Stage design, and not enemy placement, was now the primary obstacle. While purists may have grumbled about those things, even as a kid it made perfect sense. The stuff that works in 2D doesn't necessarily translate to 3D. You need new stuff. That's where less resilient gaming icons like Sonic and Mega Man got tripped up. The core of their gameplay didn't convert very well. All I can say is I hope I live to see Mario's first amazing 4D game. Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy Tactics were released within a few months of each other in '97, and they're two of the most outstanding entries in one of my favorite series. It's incredibly hard to have to choose between them. Fortunately, I don't have to, because Symphony of the Night came out that same year. I called Symphony Super Metroid in a Gothic castle, and so have lots of other people. That's not a dismissal. I love Super Metroid. I love Gothic castles. That's a slam dunk game right there. What sets Symphony apart from Metroid, and indeed from future Castlevania titles, is its constant ability to surprise you. At first, it's the way Alucard's moveset expands, and how many different spaces it expands into. Then, it's the endlessly weird and creative boss fights, each more sinister than the last. Then it's finding pieces of a game-spanning puzzle that hides an entire second map behind the fake final boss fight. And then it's a second gameplay mode with a new character, which strips away the game's RPG elements to present a more classical experience. I've been waiting a lot of years for a Castlevania game to surprise me like Symphony did back in the day, and I'm still waiting. You may have noticed that some games on this list have aged better than others. Few have aged as gracefully as Symphony. Its visuals are still gorgeous, its gameplay is still top shelf, and its voice acting is still as endearingly cheesy today as it was back in the Stone Age. Did I make a What Is a Man joke? I think I might have forgot to make a What Is a Man joke. Welcome to Kokiri Forest, the first and maybe last really well-designed tutorial area ever made for a video game. If any game needs a tutorial area, it's Ocarina of Time. This game changed absolutely everything we knew about the classic Zelda formula, while simultaneously pioneering a lot of the niceties of modern gaming. The snap behind camera, lock-on targeting, the big bright contextual action button. Hell, Ocarina was the first game where I spent a significant amount of time using free look. Everything was new now. It was Zelda cut from a fresh bolt of cloth. It's the puzzles that really sold me. Previous Zelda games had mostly self-contained puzzle rooms where you'd go in, figure out the gimmick, and then do the thing to open the door. But because they were mostly self-contained rooms, you saw all the pieces as soon as you stepped in, and the solution was rarely elusive or engaging. Usually some variation of pushing a block onto a switch. And while Ocarina has its share of block-on-switch affairs, it also has you diving 3 stories onto a spider web, or throwing bombs into the eye sockets of a statue in an impossibly giant lava cavern, or untwisting the corrupted space of a hallway so gravity on the other side is properly oriented when you enter. And the story! Zelda games had always had a mythology, something about 3 goddesses and a magic triangle that grants wishes. Ocarina takes that, shines it up, and puts it front and center. Suddenly Hyrule isn't a depopulated maze filled with monsters, but a world with several vibrant communities filled with unique races. The time travel mechanic shows a poignant before and after picture of the world, lending extra weight to our hero's quest. And the princess isn't just some MacGuffin to be collected at the end of the game, but an integral part of the plot and even a part of the action. I already said Super Metroid was my favorite, didn't I? Is it too late to change my answer? I wasn't much of a PC gamer until recently, but when I heard they were making a Planescape video game, I knew I'd be installing it day one, even though my computer at the time could barely run it. I'd been playing Dungeons & Dragons since I was 8 years old, and Planescape was my favorite setting all through middle and high school. I couldn't wait to pop in CD-ROM 1 of 5 and start exploring the multiple infinities of the Great Wheel. And then most of the game is set in Sigil, the ring-shaped city at the center of it all. And not even the whole city, just a few slices of it. I was disappointed at first that my dreams of being a canny plane-hopping blood were dashed, but I stuck with it and inevitably became transfixed. My motto still being story is everything, a game with as rich and as expansive a story as Torment drilled itself into my skull and planted a flag. In most D&D video games, the emphasis is on combat. Depending on your character's class, you want to emphasize whatever stat helps them best to kill monsters, usually strength or constitution. In Torment, where death isn't a penalty and combat is an afterthought, the stat you want to emphasize is wisdom. High wisdom opens up conversation options, and gives further experience bonuses for resolving situations through dialogue. And the plot that unravels, much to my delight, was pure Planescape. Cerebral and philosophical, and more about personal growth than saving the world from evil. I don't often recommend story-based games these days, but I'll make an exception for Torment. Square, the company that made all those wonderful Final Fantasy games I love so much, developed Super Mario RPG for the SNES. A perfectly fine game, beloved by millions, but to my eyes it was always a little too much of a Square RPG and not quite enough of a Mario game. So Nintendo had Intelligent Systems tweak the knobs a bit, then released Paper Mario, one of the only RPGs to come out for the N64. And they got it right. Paper Mario is exactly what a Mario RPG should look and play like. It has platforming challenges, including evading enemies and solving puzzles. Battles are streamlined into little action mini-games to boost special moves and defend against damage. Rather than upgrade your weapon at each new shop, they take the form of permanent upgrades that both increase Mario's power and give him new ways to interact with the world. Instead of armor, there are badges, which can be mixed and matched to create a variety of playstyles. Then there are Mario's partners, a Goomba, a Koopa, a Bob-omb, just about one each of the classic Mario Bros. Rogue Gallery. They're more like an add-on for Mario than traditional party members, both helping in battle and on the game maps. And of course, they're all adorable. All this adds up to a wonderfully fresh Mario world that kinda plays like an RPG, if you're into that sort of thing.
Wake up! Grab brush and put a little makeup. I discussed the fade away the shake up. Why'd you leave the keys up on the table? Here you go, create another fable. You wanted to.
Ico, or Eco, or ICO, or however this title is pronounced, is a game about light and shadow. That's important to note because this was the dawn of the PS2 era, and before now, making a 3D game about light and shadow would have been tricky to say the least. It's about other things too, exploration of an achingly huge castle, block pushing and rope swinging, childhood innocence and so on, but light and shadow are what stuck with me, maybe because I spent half the game beating shadow monsters off with a stick. As the PS2 hit the scene, I was just barely starting to come out of my story is everything phase, and beginning to appreciate all the other aspects of good game design. How Ico helped with that was to show me how a carefully constructed setting can enhance a game. It's not just the gorgeous graphics, although that's a big part of it. It's the whole castle and how it's built. Ico isn't just a series of rooms, it's a real place built with stone and iron and water. In the outdoor sections, you can use free look to see places far off in the distance. Those places aren't just background decorations. Those towers and catwalks are places you'll go eventually. You're looking into your own future. Ico is one of those rare gems that uses the show, not tell method of storytelling. Most of the pretty Star Princess's dialogue is an alien language we can't speak, but it's nonetheless easy to understand what she's saying just on the strength of her behavior. It's easy to fall in love with this castle and these characters, and that helps to make Ico the masterpiece that it is.
Tell me why you have to go make things so complicated. I see the way you're acting like you're somebody else.
At first, I didn't think I was going to like Metroid Prime. I was more looking forward to its sister game, Metroid Fusion, which looked like it would resemble my beloved Super Metroid. Well, the joke was on me. Fusion was an insulting hand-holdy mess, and Prime was a vast and frightening alien world filled with life and surprises. I had almost written the game off as just being another first-person shooter, but it turns out Retro Studios understood quite well what sits at the heart of every good Metroid game: gently guided exploration. Metroid Prime is a pretty linear game, but it's a great example of how to make an exploration game inside of a linear structure. It does three things to create the effect. First, it's neither a series of standalone levels, nor a central hub with branching paths. For the most part, the world of Talon 4 is just a huge environment to get lost in. Second, there's no exposition or story cutscenes to break the flow. Instead, the game makes excellent use of a scanning mechanic to impart information about Talon 4, its creatures, and what the bad guys are up to. Third, and most importantly, it's incredibly immersive. The game's HUD is presented as being Samus's literal display inside her visor. Talon 4 is full of steam vents, sub-zero lakes, and exploding slime pods that realistically obscure your field of vision. Lots of attention was paid to little details that sell the setting as a real place, and that's every bit as important to a great exploration game as a sense of non-linearity. Both Prime sequels were a little too FPS-y for my tastes, but the original still looks and plays terrifically more than a decade on.
Wake me up inside.
The most obscure title on this list, Rem, is a Myst clone for players who thought Myst was too easy. The Rem series was designed, drawn, rendered, and developed by Knut Mueller, a German Renaissance man whose name I'm almost certainly mispronouncing. Everything I already said about Myst can be applied to Rem, except Rem is unbelievably expansive. Myst was a small island and a few side worlds with a couple puzzles each. Rem is a monstrous, devious maze with dozens and dozens of puzzles, the clues to which are strewn absolutely everywhere. What that means is Rem incorporates an aspect of exploration and puzzle solving that Myst only tinkered with: observation. If you miss a clue in Myst, you'll be stuck for a little while, but since the puzzles are self-contained, the thing you're missing is always nearby. If you miss a clue in Rem, you'll be stuck for hours because the thing you're missing is printed on the backside of a door you opened yesterday in a section you've erroneously decided was cleared. What most impresses me about Rem, though, is that it's a tangible, physical place. If you had a few $1,000,000, you could build it, and if someone was willing to agree to not climb or swim or break anything, you could lock them in and they'd have an authentic, real-life Rem experience. We're up to Rem 4 now, and Rem 5 is rumored to be in development. I can't wait to be trapped in this confounding world once again.
When the pimp's in the crib, ma, drop it like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot. When the pigs try to get at you, park it like it's hot.
Speaking of brilliant games developed by individuals, I really wanted my 2004 pick to be Cave Story, and it was on an earlier version of this list. But I changed it, and then changed it back, and then back and forth like that a few more times. But in the end, Cave Story only takes the silver. That same year, we got Metal Gear Solid 3. Snake Eater is the high point of one of my favorite gaming franchises. Its gameplay is the exquisite result of fine-tuning experiments from 2 previous Metal Gear Solid titles. The story and writing are both top-notch, telling an engrossing tale of infiltration and military conflict. Naked Snake and his support team comprise one of the most lovable casts in gaming. Everything about the experience is configured to get its hooks in you. The result is a game with a more timeless quality than any of its prequels or sequels. Unlike previous Metal Gear Solid games, Snake Eater supports a variety of playstyles. You can play it with pure stealth, or you can play it as a run and gun, or any degree between the two. And in contrast to the entire rest of the series, the writing in Snake Eater doesn't come across as stilted or preachy. The boss fights and set pieces, rather than being overly gimmicky, have several good solutions each, and more than their fair share of Easter eggs to discover. Then there's the boss, the most tremendous character in the series. As Snake wrestles with his reverence for the boss, even in the face of her apparent betrayal, so too does the player. It's really rare for a game to twang the chords of emotional storytelling and stellar gameplay, but MGS3, and Cave Story for that matter, is the rare diamond in the rough.